She thought humans were weak. Till one touched her hand, she couldn't walk straight after asterisk. She was supposed to study humans. You didn't expect to want one. The alien biologist Xelari stood behind the transparent shield of the observation chamber, her long fingers tapping a quiet rhythm against her data slate. Her skin shimmered in soft violet tones, slick and smooth like polished glass. Her kind, the Xelari, were known for logic, control, and cool detachment. Mating was regulated, reproduction was clinical, and emotion was considered a flaw of lesser species. That morning, she was assigned to study Terran male reproductive traits, an unusual request from the intergalactic gene library. But Xelari was the best. Efficient, focused, unbothered by distractions. Until he walked. Sergeant Mason Cole. Human, 35 Terran years. Broad shoulders, lean frame, short-cut dark hair, and deep scars that told stories no report could explain. His body wasn't perfect in the Xelari sense. It was rugged, worn, lived in, date. But it was undeniably something. And when he stripped down for the initial scan, bare, casual, utterly unashamed, Xelari's calm shattered. What she saw hanging between his legs nearly made her drop her slate. She blinked, then blinked again. Her neural cortex lit up in confusion. That couldn't be normal. That size, that shape. Her hand trembled slightly and the temperature sensors in her palms spiked. Her skin shifted from violet to faint. Tila Xelari flush. Mason noticed. Of course he did. He looked right at her, half grinning, and said, "You sure you want to measure that? You might need a second ruler." Xelari's jaw nearly dislocated. She turned away sharply, muttering something about calibration, but her voice cracked. Her training had prepared her to dissect, analyze, even simulate mating responses. What it had not prepared her for this. He wasn't like the test subject she'd seen in the archives. He moved differently. He looked at her not like she was a sterile data drone, but like she was real. Like a woman that night, she replayed the scan footage 5 times. Strictly for data accuracy, she told herself. But her fingers lingered on the pause button. Her breathing sped up. Her bioluminescent markings lit up along her spine without permission. She didn't sleep. The next day, she requested a follow-up interview with Sergeant Cole for cultural clarification. He arrived wearing a loose shirt and tighter pants than necessary, probably on purpose. He slouched casually in the seat across from her and asked, "So, Doc, you gonna interrogate me, or just stare?" Xelari cleared her throat. "This is a formal inquiry. Please explain the purpose of the human ... hug." Mason raised an eyebrow. "You want me to show you?" She hesitated. She was trained to say no. But her body leaned forward slightly, her fingers curling toward him. He stood. "May I?" She nodded. He stepped behind her and gently wrapped his arms around her shoulders. Warm, firm, close. Her body froze. Then relaxed, then heated. She'd never felt skin like his coarse, strong, solid, not artificial softness like her species. This was real. She made a sound, a soft one, not a word, just breath. "Still studying?" He whispered, close to her ear. She nodded, barely. That night, her supervisors reviewed the footage, her glow, her reactions, her deviation from standard protocol. They flagged her for potential contamination of scientific objectivity. They issued a warning. She ignored it, because the next day, Mason asked if she wanted to see where humans really slept. She said yes. He took her to his quarters. Clean, small, personal. Nothing like the sterile lab she lived in. She sat on his bed, legs folded under her. Her markings flickered uncontrollably. He sat beside her, careful, close, but not touching. "You all right?" he asked. "I am, confused," she admitted. "I was not designed to feel this much." He smiled gently. "Then maybe you weren't designed right." Her breath caught. He lifted a hand, paused, then brushed her cheek with his thumb. Her entire nervous system lit up. Every nerve hummed. Her body responded faster than her thoughts could keep up. She leaned in. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was hungry, curious, new. Her first real touch, given not assigned, not required. Her claws scratched his back. His fingers slipped under her tunic. She gasped when he gripped her hips, firm, steady, claiming. Her body responded in ways her education never prepared her for. When they finally joined, her cry echoed through the room. It wasn't just physical. It was overwhelming. He moved slowly, then harder, then slow again. Her systems overloaded twice. She didn't care. She begged in broken English. She clung to him like gravity. When it was over, her body trembled. Her limbs wouldn't respond. She tried to sit, failed. He laughed softly and kissed her forehead. "You okay, Doc? I cannot walk. I'll carry you then." And he did. Easily, like she was precious. Kaloni had studied hundreds of species, hundreds of mating patterns. But in that moment, all her data was useless, because she had found something no scan could measure. She had found him. Kalani lay still in Mason's bed, the dim light of the room casting soft golden shadows across her bare violet skin. Her limbs ached not in pain, but in some strange new way she had no word for. Her neural centers were still firing randomly. Her inner sensors couldn't make sense of it. Nothing in her training had warned her about the after feeling, the softness after the storm. Mason was in the next room. She could hear him humming to himself, barefoot on the metal floor, making tea. Tea of all things. As if he hadn't just done something to her body that rewired her entire reproductive understanding. From the ground up, she glanced toward the door, half hoping he'd come back and do it again. Half terrified he might. Her internal cortex whispered 100 questions. Was this addiction? Was she compromised? Was she bonding? Or was this ... something else? He came back holding a ceramic mug. Not replicated. Real. Old. Probably chipped. On some distant battlefield. He handed it to her without saying a word and sat beside her on the edge of the bed. The mug was warm. She held it with both hands, more for the heat than the contents. It smelled earthy, strange, slightly bitter. Human things often were. Mason leaned back, one arm resting behind her. He didn't touch her again, not unless she chose it. "I've never been with anyone like you," she said quietly. He smirked. "Alien, you mean?" "No," she said, eyes serious, kind. We chuckled, low and warm. "You know, I didn't think this was going to happen. Thought you were just another stiff scientist? Cold? Clinical? I am," she said softly. Or ... I was. He turned to her. "So what changed?" She looked down at the mug, then back up at him. "You smiled at me. You weren't afraid of me. You didn't look at me like a specimen. Just ... a woman." He reached up and tucked a loose strand of her silver blue hair behind her ear. "That's because you are." Silence lingered between them. It's not uncomfortable, just quiet, like the space between stars. Kalani shifted closer, feeling the heat of his skin under the thin blanket. "My kind doesn't bond like this. Our pairings are engineered, scheduled, optimized for compatibility. There are forms, deadlines, tests." Mason laughed under his breath. "Yeah, humans don't do too well with all that. We just find someone who makes the world feel less stupid, and we hold on." Her lips curled slightly, the beginnings of a smile, small but real. He looked at her again, more serious this time. "Is this going to get you in trouble?" "Yes, bad trouble, possibly. Genetic reassignment and memory wipe." "Wow," he rubbed the back of his neck. "That's extreme. They don't want us to want. Desire is a flaw in my species. It interferes with obedience." Mason leaned in slightly, voice low. "I think it's your best feature." Kalini's eyes burned, not from pain, from something deeper. She'd never felt tears before. But they were there now, shimmering at the corners. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. "Then don't," he said simply. "They'll come for me. Let them." He stood slowly, walked to the control panel on the wall, and keyed in a code. The window shield pulled back with a soft hum, revealing the stars outside. She watched them in silence. Endless, scattered, free. He turned to her. There are places we can go. Dead zones, quiet ports, outposts where no one asks questions. Would you run with me? She asked, not daring to hope. I've run from worse things, he said. I've never run toward something before. Until you. Her breath caught. Then slowly, without thinking, she stood still unclothed, still glowing faintly. She crossed the floor barefoot, walked up to him, pressed her forehead to his chest. Mason wrapped his arms around her, firm, steady, no pressure. Just there. I don't even know what this is, she whispered. It's whatever you want it to be, he said. No rules, no forms, just us. She tilted her face up to his. Her voice trembled, barely audible. I want more. You sure? She nodded. I want to feel that again. The thing you did. The way you looked at me. Like I was mine. Mason smiled. Then come with me, and I'll show you what human love really feels like. And when he kissed her against low, patient, deep Kalani knew, without analysis, without data, without algorithms, she was already his. Not because she had to be, because she chose to be. And that to her people was the most dangerous thing of all. Asterisk. 3 days passed. Kalani didn't return to her station. She didn't file her report. She didn't activate her locator chip. Instead, she stayed in Mason's quarters, wrapped in soft blankets, drinking his bitter Terran tea and learning how to smile with her whole face. At night, she let him touch her again. Slowly, carefully, not for science, not for protocol. Just because she wanted to. Mason never pushed. He always asked. His kisses were warm, his voice even warmer. And when he looked at her like she was the most valuable thing in the galaxy, she forgot she was bred to be disposable. He didn't ask for her body. He cherished it, explored it like it was a planet worth studying for a lifetime. And when he whispered things like, "You don't have to be perfect here, it's just real," she melted in his arms. But the fourth morning changed everything. Kalani woke early, his heart racing. Something off in her chest, not pain, not fear, just different. She slipped out of bed, quiet not to wake him, and walked to the console terminal. She wasn't supposed to use it. But curiosity had never burned this loud. She tapped in her personal biofrequency. The screen lit. Up with her vitals, neural output, hormonal levels, cellular rates. Everything looked normal, except one blinking notification. Anomaly detected. Hybrid gestation detected 1.03 weeks host status. Compatible. DNA sync, 97% stability. Species compatibility, confirmed. Kailoni stared. She read it again. Hybrid gestation. She was pregnant. Her hands trembled. Not from fear, from wonder. Her species never produced hybrids with Terrans. It had been attempted. It always failed. Their DNA rejected human sperm within minutes. But Mason, he hadn't been rejected. He had bonded. She reached down, slowly placing her palm against her abdomen. There was nothing to feel, not yet. But the knowledge bloomed in her chest like a flare. A child. His child. She barely heard the footsteps. Behind her, Mason stepped up beside her, still half asleep, hair messy, wearing only his undershirt. "You're up early," he mumbled, then saw the screen. "What's that?" She couldn't speak. She turned, eyes wide, and just whispered, I'm with child." His eyes widened. "Wait, you're serious?" She nodded. Then he did something she didn't expect. He laughed. A short, stunned sound of disbelief, you mean? "I got you pregnant." He blinked, as if checking if this was a joke. "I thought your people couldn't. They can't," she said softly. "We're engineered to reject foreign seed. But somehow your biology," he raised an eyebrow. "Humanity, breaking rules and knocking up aliens since first contact." She gave him a look. "This is serious." "No," he said. Stepping closer, more serious now. He placed a hand over hers, on her belly. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," she said. "But I don't want them to take it from me." His grip tightened just slightly. "They won't." She looked up at him, voice trembling. "They'll track me, Mason. The longer I'm gone, the more aggressive their retrieval teams get. They discover I'm carrying a hybrid." He didn't. "Let her finish. I'll get you off this station," he said, jaw tight. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere they won't find you." "Where?" returned, already booting up his nav pad. "There's an old smuggler route. Off-grid moons. One of them's got an abandoned terra settlement with fresh air, a working hydro farm, and no scanners for 3 parsecs." Kalani watched him move confident, calm hers. He wasn't running away. He was preparing to protect. She'd never had. That not from her creators, not from her keepers. Only from him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He paused, turned slowly. Its voice was quiet. "Because I want this. You, the kid. All of it." She stared, heart slamming in her chest. "I'm not just some one-night wonder for me, Kai," he said. "I know you were bred to avoid love, but I wasn't. And I've never felt this way about anyone. I don't know how to love," she whispered. "Sure you do," he said. "You're doing it right now." She didn't argue, because deep down, she knew he was right. It took less than 2 hours to gather supplies. Mason pulled rank on a few unsuspecting deck techs, forged a departure. Coden loaded her into a civilian freighter he'd once used for covert missions. He called it the Blue Thorn. She teased him about the name, said it was named after his sister. It's not his ego. She kissed him for it anyway. As the engines warmed and the station faded behind them, Kailani stood in the main chamber, wrapped in his old jacket, one hand resting. Over her abdomen, Mason joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She didn't answer. She turned and kissed him, this time deeper, this time with intent. "I don't want to just run anymore," she said against his lips. Then, "Let's build," he replied. "A life, a place, a family." The stars stretched before them. Her species would come. But she didn't care, because she finally knew what it meant to belong. Not to a program, not to a lab, but to someone who saw her not as a creation, but as a choice. And that made all the difference. Asterisk, the plasma storm hit 2 days into their escape at first. It was just static across the sensors, a few electromagnetic pops and bursts on the edge of the nav map. Mason didn't panic. He'd flown through worse. But this wasn't just a storm, it was cover. Something else was using it. He noticed the blip just before they hit the edge of the cloud, a patrol-class skimmer. It's unmarked. No official registry, no public beacon. That meant private. That meant bounty. "They found us," he muttered. Punching in a new vector and throttling the engine hard, Kailani stood beside him, her hand already on her abdomen. She didn't ask questions. She just knew. "Are we faster?" she asked, steady to calm. "No," Mason said, "but we're smarter." The Blue Thorn dove into the plasma storm at full burn, the hull lighting up with streaks of blue and white electricity. Outside, it looked like lightning dancing across space. Inside, the ship groaned under pressure. He shut down the beacon, killed the heat signature, ran dark. "Can you still see them?" Kalani asked, eyes locked on the sensor panel. "Barely," he said. "They've got dampeners too. Whoever's flying that ship knows how to hunt." "Then it's not a retrieval team," she said quietly. Mason looked at her. "Worse," she nodded. "My people don't chase. They send signals. This is private sector, bot muscle." "What? You mean someone paid to get you back?" She exhaled. "Or kill me." That made Mason clench his jaw. "They try to take youth, they won't live to regret it." Kailani didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she walked to the locker and unlatched it, sighed. Mason kept spare tools, food packs, and one dusty stunner pistol. She stared at it for a long moment. Her hands hovered over the grip, then she picked it up. It felt heavier than it looked. Back on her world, she had never been allowed to hold a weapon. Too emotional, they said. Too unpredictable. Her biology was built for beauty, not violence. But that night, standing in a ship she'd claimed with her own choices, protecting a child she had chosen to carry, ... she wrapped her fingers around the grip and said, "Show me how to use this." Mason blinked, surprised. "You sure?" not the one running anymore. So he showed her how to aim, how to brace, where to shoot if she needed to kill, and where to aim if she only wanted to disable. She memorized it all with terrifying speed. Later, they tucked the ship deep inside an asteroid cluster, letting the static and rock formations jam the patrol's sensors. Mason powered down everything except life support. Inside the dark, the silence was loud. He sat across from her, watching her polish the stunner with methodical care. "You ever taken a life?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "But I've had mine taken from me, piece by piece." He didn't say anything, just looked at her. Then her voice cracked, softer now. "I won't let them take what I finally built. Not you. Not our child. If I have to kill to protect that, then I will." And that was the moment he realized. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming dangerous. Not in the way her creators feared. Not reckless. Not wild. She was free. The next morning, the patrol found them. They cut through the asteroid belt on foot, 3 figures, in powered exosuits, armed with stun batons and restraining nets. They didn't call out. They didn't ask questions. They just boarded. Mason heard the door breach and grabbed his weapon. He motioned to Kaloni to hide, but she didn't move. She stepped forward, gun in hand. The first bounty hunter spotted her and raised his baton. "Stand down," he shouted. "Set 7 4K. Why? You are." She fired. The bolt hit center mass. His armor absorbed it, but the force knocked him off balance. Mason dove in from the left, tackling the second hunter and slamming his head into the bulkhead. The third one, tall and masked, raised his weapon and fired. Kalani twisted, rolled under the shot, and fired back. This time the bolt hit his leg, frying the servo motor. He collapsed. Then she was on him. She pressed the barrel to his visor. He looked up at her. Even through the mask, she could feel his disdain. "Defective bitch," he snarled. "You were bred to obey." Kalani's hand didn't shake. "Wasn't bred to choose, but I chose this." She pulled the trigger. The bolt hit him point blank. He went limp. Silence fell. Mason stood slowly, wiping blood from his lip. He looked at the bodies, then at her. "You all right?" he asked. She was breathing hard, skin flushed teal again, eyes glowing faintly. Her markings shimmered like firelight. "No," she said. "But I will be." Mason walked over, put his arms around her, and held her there in the dark. Not because she needed rescuing, but because she didn't. That night she curled into his arms, silent, shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline. From victory. From the weight of what she'd done. He kissed her forehead. "You did what you had to," he said. "I know," she whispered. "But something's changed. I feel like I'm not who I was before." "You're not," he said softly. "More." And as the ship drifted back into silence, Kalani lay awake, listening to the hum of the systems. Her body hurt, her heart ached, but in the darkness, with his hand resting gently over the small curve of her belly, she felt strong. For the first time in her life, she didn't just exist because someone created her. She existed because she decided to. And now, she was ready to fight for it. Asterisk, the moon didn't have a name, at least not one. Anyone remembered old star charts labeled it Sector 19, Drift for B, and even that was generous. It was a forgotten chunk of gray-blue rock with low atmosphere, dense clouds, and a crust laced with iron-rich moss that glowed faintly at night. No satellites, no ports, no data relays. Perfect. Mason landed the blue thorn on a mossy plateau beneath a jagged cliff wall. The air was breathable. Just barely on, the surrounding canyons offered natural cover from orbital scans. He'd been here once, years ago, during a smuggler run that ended in a crashed cargo hauler and 2 broken ribs. Back then, it felt like the loneliest place in the universe. Now, it felt like a beginning. They unloaded the freighter slowly. No rush, just the rhythm of building something with their hands. Ration crates, thermal blankets, salvaged metal turned into makeshift walls. The old hydroponic unit Mason had stashed on board years ago finally found a purpose. Kalani worked beside him without complaint. She learned fast. She didn't flinch at cold wind or rusted metal. She stopped calling things by their technical codes and started naming them in her own language, small words from the half-forgotten dialect of her mother's line. The fire pit they built from old hull plating, she called it Serelina Place. Of breath, Mason asked her what he should be called. She looked at him seriously and said, Aratel. What's that mean? She paused. One who makes a future. He kissed her for that. They slept in the same blanket, tangled in the quiet. She never asked him to hold her, but he always did, and she never moved away. The stars above the plateau shone brighter than either of them had seen before. No satellites. No light pollution. Just a million silver truths scattered across black velvet. Kalani would lie there at night, her head on Mason's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It was louder than hers. Slower, constant. She liked it more than she could ever admit, but it wasn't peace that startled her on the fourth night. It was life. A flicker. A twitch. A flutter just beneath her skin. She sat up in the dark, heart pounding. Her hand flew to her belly. Mason stirred beside her. Groggy, you okay? She couldn't speak. She grabbed his hand, pressed it flat against her stomach. Waited there, eh? Movement, faint, but real. Mason blinked. Was that? Kailani nodded slowly, her eyes shining. It moved. He smiled wide and dumb and amazed. That's our kid. She let out a soft sound. Not a laugh, not a cry, something in between. Her entire body trembled. I didn't think it would feel like this, she whispered. Like what? Like I'm real. Mason didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her as the stars wheeled slowly above. Later, she asked him if human children always moved like that. He smiled. The good ones means they're strong. I was taught human genes were unstable, impure. Guess we proved them wrong. You didn't just prove them wrong, she said quietly. You gave me a body I wanted to keep living in. He kissed her then, slower than usual, deeper, not rushed, not hungry, just there. She moaned softly into his mouth, her hands running along the line of his jaw. Her body still ached in places from the escape, from the fight, from carrying. A child not designed by a lab. But she didn't care, because when he touched her now, he did it like a man who belonged to her. Not because he claimed her, but because she let him. They made love by firelight that night. Her skin glowing faintly, his hands steady and warm. He whispered things she didn't understand, but she didn't need to. She felt every word in the way he held her. And when they collapsed into each other afterward, breathless, sweaty, her head on his chest again, ... she whispered, I want this to last. Mason kissed the top of her head. Then we'll make it. But peace, as always, was temporary. The signal came the next morning. Kalani was out gathering moss samples. Mason was calibrating the perimeter motion net, the CUM panel inside the ship. Blinked once. No sound, no alert. Just a soft green pulse. Unregistered source. No encryption. Just 3 words. We know where. Mason's stomach turned to ice. He didn't call Kalani right away. He checked the sensors. No ships overhead. No energy spikes. Pings. Whoever sent the message didn't want to be seen. Just heard Kalani returned an hour. Later, dirt under her fingernails, small blue moss strands cupped in her hands like treasure. She saw his face and froze. What happened? He held up the message. Her hands curled tight around the moss. They've found us, she said, voice flat. No ships yet, he replied. Could be a bluff. Could be a leak. Or a test. She said, stepping into the freighter. They want to see if we'll run. Mason looked at her. What do you want to do? She looked down at her stomach, then up at him. I'm done running, but if we stay, we fight. And this time, they won't send soft targets. Mason nodded. Then we fortify. Kalani blinked. You're not leaving, Kai? He said. Softly, I've seen enough wars. Enough bad odds. But I've never had something worth dying for before. She stepped closer. Her eyes welled with something deep and full. You're not going to die, she whispered. No, because I'm going to fight too, he smiled. Then handed her the second gun from the case. Asterisk, they came at sunrise. Not loud, not clumsy. Not with sirens or demands. Just shadows on the ridge. 6 figures in matte black armor, rifles slung low, helmets sealed, moving in sync like machines. No emblems, no flags, no Federation signatures. These weren't soldiers, they were contractors. Hunters brought in to retrieve, colony and terminate any unregistered biological cross-contamination, which meant Mason, she saw them before he did. She was crouched near the cliff's edge, watching the stars fade behind purple clouds, when a glint caught her eye, just a flicker, a shape too sharp to be part of the rock. She didn't move, didn't blink. She just slid one hand to her communicator and tapped once. Mason's voice answered immediately. They're here, she said softly. He didn't ask how many, didn't ask if she was sure. He just said, come back. We're locking down. Colony didn't run. She moved carefully down the cliff trail, every step precise, every sense sharpened. Her heart wasn't racing, not yet. That part came later. For now, it was pure focus. She'd been programmed to be graceful, elegant, controlled. They never thought to weaponize. Mason had already armed the perimeter traps. Clay pulses, thermoblind flash grenades. Crude, old-school defenses, things that didn't rely on digital signals, because he knew the enemy would jam them. Inside the cabin, he handed Colony her stunner rifle and a set of kinetic bracers he'd modified himself. I'm not losing you, said. She looked him dead in the eyes. Then don't hold back. By the time the first shot rang out, they were ready. A flash exploded behind the eastern boulder cluster. Mason's proximity charge. One of the mercs stumbled, stunned. Kylani fired instantly. Her shot was clean, precise, right to the shoulder joint. The man spun backward and hit the dirt hard. Another one tried to flank. Kylani moved like liquid. She slid between trees, her skin blending into the mist, glowing just enough to distract. When the second hunter aimed, hesitated. Caught by the shimmer of her bare arms, she fired. The bolt hit his helmet and dropped him like dead weight. Mason shouted from the cabin, "West side, 2 more." She sprinted toward the ridge, bracers humming. A hunter charged. Gun raised, she ducked under his swing, drove her elbow into his ribs, and cracked the bracer against his knee. The impact let out a satisfying snap. He screamed, "She!" Didn't another merc tackled her from behind? She hit the ground hard, mud spraying across her skin. His weight was crushing, his arm around her neck. She gasped, clawing, vision blurring. Then dash bam, a stun burst hit him square in the back. Mason, he ran to her, yanked the body off, and dropped to his knees. Kai, she coughed. Fine. He grabbed her wrist, pulled her to her feet. 4 down, 2 left. She turned, blood on her lips, and smiled. Then let's finish it. The final 2 hunters retreated toward the tree line, trying to regroup. Kylani flanked right. Mason left. She fired, missed. One of them lobbed a disruptor. Grenade. Mason threw himself in front of her without thinking. The blast hit him like a truck. He flew backward, hit the moss-covered ground, and didn't move. Mason. Kylani screamed so loud her voice cracked. She ran to him, heart in her throat, hands grabbing his shirt, shaking him. His eyes fluttered open, dazed, still. Here, she cried then. It's not for pain, it's for fear. For the first time she imagined. A world without him in its hand, it nearly broke her. One of the hunters raised. His weapon, Colony stood. She didn't aim, she charged. The man hesitated. Just long enough, she tackled him with everything she had, slammed him into the tree trunk. So, hard the bark cracked. She grabbed his rifle, flipped it, and drove the butt into his visor once. Twice. 3 times until the glass shattered and his head slumped. She turned to the last one. He raised his hands slowly. I was just paid, that's all. Even know what you are? She stepped forward, glowing faint blue now, eyes cold. I'm a mother. She shot him once in the leg, then once in the chest. When it was over, she collapsed beside Mason. Her hands trembled as she pressed them to his ribs. Checking for blood. You idiot, she whispered. You jumped in front of a grenade, he groaned. Worth it. She laughed through tears. You nearly died. You're worth dying for. She gripped his hand hard. Don't say that. I don't want a hero. I want you alive. He pulled her down into his arms, weak but smiling. I'm not going anywhere. She laid her head on his chest, listening to the beat. Still strong, still there. They lay like that for a long time, surrounded by smoke, broken gear, and twitching bodies. The moss glowed faintly beneath them. The air smelled of ozone and wet earth. When Mason finally whispered, "We're gonna have to move again," she didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled his hand to her stomach. There it was again, the flutter, the kicked life. Then she said softly, "Not yet. I want to remember what it feels like to win." And together, in the ruins of the life they built, they held each other as the sun finally broke through the clouds, its light warm on their skin, their scars, their future. Asterisk, the refuge wasn't marked on any map. Even Mason had trouble finding it. And he'd spent years stashing intel in the darkest corners of forgotten space. A friend from his old unit, long thought dead, now living under a new name, sent him the coordinates. No questions asked. They jumped twice through backwater routes. They refueled in a forgotten depot orbiting a dead planet using old forged tags. Every move was quiet, methodical, desperate. By the time they reached the coordinates, the Blue Thorn was running on patchwork systems and fumes. But there it was, Juno's. Hollow a moon wrapped in thick clouds, with a single green-blue valley tucked beneath geothermal ridges and electromagnetic fields that scrambled scans from orbit. Half jungle, half marsh, with breathable air, underground spring water, and dense, self-healing flora. It wasn't paradise, but it was safe, and that was enough. They landed just before the storm season hit. Freighter groaned, but it made it down. Mason set up temporary solar panels while Kalani cleared the old research dome, abandoned years. I'd go by some early exploration crew. The air smelled like moss and rain. The ground was warm underfoot. Birds sang in strange pitches. Trees shifted when touched, releasing clouds of pollen that glowed for seconds, then vanished like fireflies. She fell in love with it almost instantly. Not because it was beautiful, but because it had no history, no expectations, no surveillance, no one watching it. Was like someone had carved out a place in the universe where people could finally just be. By the second week, Kaysen had reinforced the dome. By the third, Kailani had planted a patch of moss from Drift 4B beneath a sun lamp. So the child remembers where it first kicked, she said softly. He didn't argue. He just held her hand and watched it grow. Her belly was rounding now, smooth, warm, alive. The child inside kicked regularly, strong, steady. Human stamina mixed with Xelari, genetic resilience. A miracle neither species thought possible. Some nights, they'd lie on the cot, her back against his chest, her body glowing. Faintly as his hand rested on her stomach, he would hum low human lullabies, the kind no one remembered anymore. She would whisper translations in her language. Love didn't need the same tongue. It just needed time and presence and choice. One night, the cum panel blinked. Just once. Mason saw it first. He didn't say anything, just watched it pulse, unread. Kaloni noticed. She walked over slowly, still barefoot, and touched the screen. A text-only message, encrypted. Brief. We are not coming.
Ow!
We've erased. You don't contact us again? Kailani stared at it for a long time. Then she pressed a single command. Delete. The message vanished. She turned, her eyes unreadable. They've disowned me. Mason stood slowly. I'm sorry. No. She said, don't be. To the edge of the dome, touched the curved wall, stared out at the trees that swayed with no wind. They never named me. Not once, just designations, just numbers. But here, she turned and looked at him. I have a name. I have you. Soon I'll have someone who shares both. Mason stepped closer, pulled her into him, arms wrapped around her forehead. Pressed to hers. You're not alone anymore, Kai. Neither are you. They stayed like that for a long time. Later, they built a marker at the edge of the clearing. Not a grave, not a monument. It's just a stone with a carved word, belong. Kalani said it was the first word she ever learned in English that felt like a heartbeat. Months passed. Rain came and went. Trees bloomed and shed. The moss spread like soft wildfire under the sun lamps. And one morning, under violet dawnlight, in the quietest hour before sunrise, Kailani gave birth. No med pods, no machines, just Mason, her hand in his voice in her ear. She cried out, oh, fierce and wild, her body doing something it was never engineered to do but doing it anyway. And when the child emerged, pink-skinned, with hints of violet sheen, eyes like starlight and lungs loud enough to shake, the Damason laughed and cried all at once. He held the baby with shaking hands, wrapped it in cloth and placed it gently. On her chest, Kailani stared at the child for a long time, then whispered, you are not made, you are chosen. The baby kicked and smiled. 3 days later, Mason carved another stone and placed it beside the first. This one had 2 words. We stayed. Because they did, not because they ran, not because they hid, but because they fought. Love that was never supposed to happen, a life that no species planned, and a future born from defiance and desire. Kailani wasn't a project anymore. She was a partner, a mother, a protector. And Mason wasn't a soldier. He was a builder, a father, a man who saw someone discarded by her own people and said, you are mine, and I am yours. Together, they didn't just survive, they belonged. And somewhere, beyond the jungles and storms and empty maps, the stars blinked softly. Like they knew this little corner of the galaxy had become something rare: home, the end.